This is the Brick Commentary Central. You're listening to the BCC Podcast. It is Wednesday, May 11th of 2022, and you're listening to episode 307 of the BCC Podcast. I'm LQ, and it's just me here today because I said I was going to do this episode, and we're finally going to do it before it becomes so horribly outdated that it's irrelevant. That's right, it is the infamous core rant. Well, not really so much as a rant, it is a very harsh critique. I do want to start and preface this episode by making sure to remove anything that could come across as personal. As you can see, I have a tweet up here from Tooth Dominoes, a Lego designer who I actually had the pleasure of meeting in the past. He is an extremely nice guy, and I think he often does incredibly good work. This is not questioning if he is a good designer, if there is any malice involved in it. I don't think there was. This is simply me disagreeing behind the philosophy of some of these sets and why I believe it's flawed, it's not the right direction, and it should not have been a step that Lego took. And something I hope that they do not continue in the future. So again, nothing personal at all. If this ever does happen to reach Neek, I'm, again, a huge fan of his work, like 99% of the time. It's just this certain philosophy for these sets I don't agree with, even given the reasons stated, which we're going to go over here. So, for those who are not in the know, the first wave of Ninjago sets for 2022 was called Ninjago Core. These did not correlate with any of the main story of Ninjago, either current or present or even future, but rather were a bunch of sets just unrelated to anything in the story at all. And that in itself was already kind of disappointing. Like, one of the main draws to Ninjago is you get the sets and they line up with this story, you see them in the show. And, of course, that has been an issue with some waves in the past. Certain sets do not line up with the show well at all. But in this wave, it was very deliberate. Nothing to do with the show or the story or anything. There were the Virtues of Spinjitzu shorts, which, how canon they are, is very dubious, to say the least. The quality is not. They're bad. They're like some of the worst media that has come out of Ninjago, and I forget if we had a previous discussion on those shorts. I feel like we did. But there's not a ton to discuss there either way. They're not good. They're some of the worst content that has come out of Ninjago. Just, I don't recommend them at all. Though maybe go and check them out and form your own opinions on it. So, that's just the first issue, was that these sets, they did not have anything to do with the story. And then came issues with the designs itself. A lot of them were incredibly simplified designs. A lot of them fell under the 6+ or 7+ range, and that's fine. I'm fine with, like, certain sets for certain age ranges. I was never opposed to, like, juniors or anything. Difference was this time they took up a good portion of this wave. All of them felt a lot more dumbed down, so to say, with a few exceptions. There are a couple bigger sets in this wave, like the Ultra Combo Mech. Let me double check on that name here. Yeah, the Ultra Combo Mech. Darn, that does not sound right. And there is also Aloyd's Legendary Dragon. And the Ninja Dojo Temple. And I own 2 out of the 3 of those. I will say up front, I actually did purchase a fair amount of these sets, so I have some very informed opinions on them at this point. So yeah, just to be clear, the sets that I do own, I have actually the 4+ Lloyd Ninja Mech, which I'm not going to critique too harshly here. I basically got that because it was $3 without any minifigures, and I figured why not. But then I have also got Lloyd's Legendary Dragon, the Ninja Dojo Temple, all of the spinners, and the Spinjitzu training grounds. I have not completely built the temple. I have built the Kai Mech out of it, though, because that was the part I was most interested in for the sake of this critique. Now, I will say I do like the ninja designs for this wave a lot, so it's not a critique of those either. This is going to go mainly as a critique of the sets. So before we get into the tweets about the design philosophy, let's bring up the sets here. We had the Lightning Dragon Evo brought up earlier. And again, it's not that the designer's bad at his job or anything. I think he was given some very specific instructions on what this is supposed to be. However, I consider this, in all accounts, an absolutely awful set. Those wings look awful on there. The way the tail does not flow whatsoever. It looks oddly chunky and spindly in other areas. You can see how that jaw is attached to the head. Everything is off about this set. Another big thing, which I actually did not get into before, the villains are the most uninspired thing ever. Snakes again. And there's just 3 of them throughout this wave. Again, no story relevance even. It's head molds that we've already seen a few times here, both with the Pyro Vipers and with the Moray Guards. Even though I really do like Orange, they are incredibly boring antagonists. They add nothing to the sets whatsoever. And this is not exclusive to this set. Kai's Fire Evo Dragon as well, I think, is just as bad, even though it is a much bigger set. That wing piece I don't like on this size of set at all. Now we know it's also used in the upcoming Crystallized set for the Dragon Ninja. I think it works much better there because its size works way better relatively. And yeah, this is a $30 set as well, with an awful price to piece ratio. That is 204 pieces for $30. We're going to talk soon about some of the pricing for Ninjago Crystallized, but really some of it started here. So the dragons I consider absolutely atrocious. They're not good at all. And then we'll bring up here, let's bring up Zane's Mech. This one I don't own personally. I do, however, have the Kai Mech from the Dojo Temple. This one I actually might pick up eventually if I find it for really cheap, because I don't absolutely hate it, but I hate some of the philosophy behind it. Then let me explain what I mean there. To give credit, my initial reaction to this is it looks like it's hardly any parts at all. The bodies are much more intricately built than I expected, so that's good. But we have 2 new pieces here, and that's really where my issue lies. We have this armor shell piece, which reminds me a lot of CCBS in a very negative way. And we have the new leg and arm piece. It is already pre-bent. And that gets rid of any sort of articulation for the elbows and knees, which of course I have an issue with, even if this is for, I believe this one is labeled as 6+. Let me double check that. Yes, this one's labeled as 6+. However, that part could have easily been a ratchet. It would have been very easy for kids to pose. Remember, I grew up with Bionicle, which I had got as a 6-year-old, and I had no problem with knees and elbows and stuff, so I disagree with LEGO's philosophy on not adding knees to mechs in other sets already. We see them moving away from that in a lot of sets as well, so I think it was flawed from the beginning, and I think they might be working to correct it. However, this piece, and like devising a system of mechs with these pieces, I have issues with it. If we compare it to something like the Marvel mechs, those have a lot more articulation, though they might be more spindly in some areas, and some could argue this might be more aesthetically pleasing. They have a lot more posability, including like around the waist, I believe, in many of them. They all have knees, and some of them even have elbows, at least more articulation around the wrists. So yeah, looking at like the Wolverine mech here, that definitely has knees, has so much more articulation. I think it looks like a much better mech. Let me pull up a picture here so everyone can have that as comparison. So I think this new piece they created actually is a huge detriment to these mechs. It just limits the possibilities so much. There we are, side by side with the Wolverine mech here. So they use the kind of the same philosophy for the chassis there. As you can see, this one has several points of articulation in the arm, several points in the leg. Well, on the Ninjago mech, only articulation in the shoulder, somewhat on the wrist, the ankle, and the hip. And again, you might be able to argue that the Wolverine mech is a lot more spindly, and that might be a downside for a lot of people, and I can understand that. However, I think there is a better way to do this overall, especially when you look into what this piece is they created for the arm and the leg. It's pre-bent. It has this circular piece right in there, which could have easily placed something for like a ratchet, have two pieces instead, and then you've got the best of both worlds here. You've got arms and legs that move really well, actually a really nice and versatile new piece. It would have been great, but for some reason we settled on this philosophy that kids need no articulation, that they can't handle, more points of movement. I disagree with that fundamentally. I think the LEGO group goes back and forth on this about how much kids are able to handle when it comes to building or even playing and displaying with their toys, and I don't think they should always cater to the lowest common denominator there. Alright, so we've talked a bit about the sets now. Let's go into the philosophy behind these sets. So I mentioned how it was very apparent that a lot of these sets were focused more on younger kids, which is not an issue at all. That's fine. But the appeal of Ninjago previously is an appeal of LEGO in general, I believe, is that it can appeal to all ages and you don't have to dumb stuff down. So let's bring up Neek's tweets here again, and we're going to go over step by step. This does definitely help me understand the philosophy of why these sets went the way they did. I do not agree with it, though. So this thread is about Ninjago core development. In spring of 2020, we got a brief for what our leadership had in mind for 2022. We asked to come up with a line of Ninjago that would not only stand on its own without content, but also be the epitome of Ninjago toys. So already I see an issue with that. For one, also it's clear where this is coming from. It's coming from leadership, not the designers themselves. I don't know what level of leadership, if it was real high up, if just their direct managers, head of design, I don't know. So, I'm not sure if anyone else notices here, but there is a extreme contradiction here. Stand on its own without content and be the epitome of Ninjago toys. Ninjago is successful because of the combination of toys and content. You cannot have the epitome of Ninjago toys without the epitome of Ninjago content. It's just not possible. So already I see a major issue with how they presented these sets and why many of them end up being underwhelming, because you can't just create something without content and expect it to be the best. That content was always there to support the sets, to make them better, to breathe additional life into something that was already great on its own. That doesn't mean the sets can't be good still. But as we'll see, it definitely brought them down overall. So then he talks about after specialized launches like Prime Empire and Cbound, the markets asked for a wave with the classic Ninjago identity. We would not get any story continuing content in order to make sure that we could get started on second half of 2022 as early as possible. And now we know why that is. Actually, that might even justified. The crystallized sets are amazing, maybe some of the best Ninjago sets ever. So we can see they didn't put a lot of time into these sets, and while that's understandable, I don't think it's excusable. I think every set should be... Lego is a premium product. It is not a cheap product, and everything we buy from them, we should expect the highest levels of quality for. That doesn't mean to nitpick everything, and I don't like people just complain about everything, but when something's not meeting the standards of other Lego sets, especially within the same year, I think there's an issue there. Because these aren't cheaper, they're still paying just as much, and we're going to be paying even more coming this summer. I think it's fair to be demanding the utmost quality for that price. And, or move on. Well, actually, no. One other thing. After specialized launches like Prime Empire and Cbound, I'm very confused about the timeline there, because here they wanted to come up with it in the spring of 2020. And then here they talk about they got complaints of specialized launches in Cbound, which came out in the second half of 2021. I don't think that's a deliberate lie or anything. I'm just very confused at how that goes together, because they couldn't have got, if they were developing these sets before Prime Empire and Cbound came out. Actually, I think Prime Empire might have been out at this point, because that was 2020, when we had Master of the Mountain second half, the Island in first half 2021. Okay, so they may have just had Prime Empire, and maybe that's just a misstep on here. Maybe they did get these complaints right away. That could explain it, but it is odd because they've had one specialized release at that point then, which is Prime Empire, and they're saying they got complaints for wanting sets with the classic Ninjago identity. There's a couple of issues with that. For one, we had Ninjago Legacy at that point, which literally was classic Ninjago identity. Second, you can't just do the same thing forever with a theme that's running 11 years now. And I don't think they're saying that they can't do specialized themes here, so don't get me wrong, I just want to make sure this is hammered home. We weren't missing classic Ninjago. It was on the shelf. So I'm very confused. I totally believe some of these comments came in, but I feel like this just has the smell of an executive coming in one day, grabbing a few comments they got from, the customer feedback section, and saying, this is what I'm going to run with today. This, I'm going to make Ninjago better. That's going to be my mark on the theme. Just as someone who has worked in a corporate setting quite a bit, and seeing how managers and executives will hold on to these things and go on to these concepts that really the market is not asking for, but a small portion of people are, and they think that they can reinvent everything and just, do the next great thing. That's what it seems like to me. I don't know for certain. Obviously, we have very limited information we're working with here, but we're working with what we're given. And I disagree with that premise. I think Ninjago had plenty of classic ninja type stuff to buy at the time. I don't think it needed a refresh at that point to be more classic. So I disagree with that being put into the design philosophy at all, because what you got out of it instead were sets that are much more boring. Remember, this is right off the Fire and Ice chapter as well, where we got sets that were much closer to, not specialized theme or anything, but still very different, still very good, unique, and I think that's what they should have went with. And we have stuff in, again, Legacy. We have, the re-release of the Destiny Bounty. We had the Fire Dragon recently, which is actually, I think, maybe the best Ninjago Dragon. That's a really great set. I did not think so at first, but when I built it, that is probably my favorite dragon. It's got the most articulation. It has the best use of wings of any dragon. The head is a little bit small because of that mold they've been using recently, but it's definitely not something that kills the set. So we've got all this stuff. And some people have argued, oh, well, it's tied to old seasons of the show, so then it's going to be confusing to people. How? I think a lot of people miss this. we're not living in an era anymore when something goes off the air on TV that people can't see it, for one. Kids today are not watching Ninjago reruns on Cartoon Network. Those don't even exist. Kids today are watching Ninjago on Netflix. And you know what's on Netflix? Almost all of Ninjago, because they got rid of the pilots for some reason. That's stupid. But you can find those out there. It should be more easily accessible. Lego could be doing way better with making the show more easily accessible to new fans. But kids go back and watch the older stuff. And it says right on the box, like, where you find it in the show. That already makes it easy. And on the flip side of that, if it's parents and they already don't know anything about the story, what does it matter? This dragon is brand new to them. It's the same thing as having no story whatsoever. The fact that there is no story on the set, or it's a story from previous years, makes no difference to a parent buying this for their kids. It just doesn't. So, again, I'm sure people had these complaints, but I don't think they were legitimate complaints that reflected the majority of the market. It feels like someone got these complaints, and maybe there is even a loud enough minority that feels like they were getting more of that than praise for these sets. Because people, if they have no issue with their product, you're generally not going to hear from them. And I understand that can make some things very difficult from a marketing perspective. But you should be confident in what has worked in the past. Trying to do something new, and it could very well be polarizing to a lot of people, being the lack of story, is very risky. So you don't always want to listen to complaints of just a few people. You definitely don't want to go into a vocal minority for any business decision. You always want to look for what people are buying. And maybe Cbound and Prime Empire didn't sell as well, but it would have been really early again at the time they are getting these, the premise for what they're designing on. They're getting it early 2020? Yeah, 2020. That would have been Prime Empire. They would not have had time to see how those sets are going to sell long term. From what I've heard, the Fire and Ice chapter sets sold worse. That is just hearsay from people who've worked in Lego shops, that those sets ended up being heavily discounted, which I kind of wish I would have known about, because those are some nice sets there. And I would have liked to pick up some of them that I didn't have the chance to originally. But that means that stuff with the more generic theme to it was not selling well. And lest we not forget, those even had snake villains too. So yeah, it's just not adding up here. I can see how it would have come about in a corporate setting, but I do not agree with what they came up with. So I think we've talked that point to death. I just don't agree that there was an issue with a lack of regular Ninjago. And I also see that I was talking about, like, if people have called in. I'm seeing it's not actually in this tweet. I'm misremembering this from a while ago somewhere else. It's either in this tweet chain, and we will see it again later, or I did actually have a few interactions with Neek on the TTV Discord server about this stuff, where he was explaining it to me and others further. But let's dig into more of this. On top of that, there was an ask to make sure this line helped recruit younger kids into Ninjago between our 4+ and the usual 7 and up sets. There was a gap. We wanted to make sure the number of 6+ sets to fill that gap. I don't agree that that's needed. Again, something that we never needed before. Why suddenly do we need it now? Ninjago was massively successful without that. And is this really the type of stuff that's going to be great for them? Maybe it is. I don't agree, though. I think it would have been best to maybe make sets that were somewhat simpler, but still could have appealed to everyone. I think it went way too far in the direction to simplify some of these over making something that looks and feels good. In order to ensure an appropriate building experience for the 6+ age mark, we started a lot of model and elemental concepts to explore the 3 cornerstones of Ninjago: vehicles, dragons, and mechs. Yeah, that's fair. I can see those are sets that sell very well all the time. I always like new dragons. I always like new mechs. Cars, they need to be a good car, which we didn't really talk about those much here. The cars for core are okay at best. I would describe them as fairly mediocre sets with a premium price tag. Like the Jay and Nia race car Evo, that set is $50. Now, it actually doesn't have a bad price to piece ratio. The kicker, though, is that it looks like this. Oh, there we are. Yeah, that looks like this. Now, I don't know about all of you. This does not feel like $50 to me, especially given the other sets that I can get for like $40. But that's kind of beside the point of this tweet in particular. I don't really have an issue with this philosophy in general. But again, it's not like we had a lack of this stuff recently. We just had the Titan Mech. We had, which is, okay, a very big set. Maybe we want some smaller mechs. I can get on board with that. Dragons, we just had like the Fire Dragon. Trying to think if we did get any race cars recently. Prime Empire definitely had some cars around that time. We had that Legacy sets again at that time with like the Lloyd Jungle Buggy. I believe we had just got in the Ninja XR, the Kai rebooted vehicle, which actually that was like one of the worst Legacy sets. That one, it was vastly inferior to the original rebooted set, which is disappointing because most of the Legacy sets were actually way better than their original counterparts. Yeah, we are still getting all of those. So again, not an issue with the philosophy here exactly, but it's weird they're acting like this was something the theme was lacking. Okay, I was tasked to start concept work on the mech and buildable character direction. I started exploring potential building platforms and upgrade mechanics. Oh yes, that's something we didn't really talk about before. Technically, all of these sets have upgrade mechanics in, but it's basically just taking parts off. And you have a really ugly base. I don't agree that the upgrade mechanic came out best. Again, it's nothing to say Tooth Dominoes is a bad designer. He's not. He's a very good designer. That also doesn't mean everyone's going to do a good job every time they design something. Ah, here we are. Insert to SCCBS, System, Character and Creature Building System, patent pending. Here I pitch a number of potential pieces to make appealing mechs while keeping the building experience 6+ appropriate. So, several of these I actually don't believe we have seen yet. I actually like that part right here, which is kind of like the newer, smaller socket joint, all in one arm piece. We don't have a lot of pieces that do that. We only have this basic piece right here currently. That one would have been cooler to get, though it still has the issue of lack of elbows, so it actually would have been cool to get a 2x2 that is more like this, a 1x2 with the ball and socket piece in it. We also did not get the piece with the hand, and I don't believe we got this body piece either, but that's actually one I do not like there. This kind of goes back to my issue with CCBS as well. I was never huge on CCBS because I felt, well, actually most CCBS sets have more pieces than classic like Technic Bionicle. What they lack in is something that feels like a unique building experience every time. It ends up feeling very repetitive the more CCBS sets you build. That's on top of an aesthetic that is more samey and sleeker every single time, which I think becomes boring after a while. A lot of people like that still, though I do think the numbers speak for themselves. It didn't take off like Technic did back in the day. It could have just been an issue of wrong place, wrong time. I just don't think it had that long-term appeal as well as the Technic stuff did. But again, for here, that's neither really here nor there. It is just interesting that these are two concepts which I don't entirely agree are great. Because when you have a mech, some people already complain that like Ninjago does too many mechs and they're oversaturated at this point. I tend to like almost all of them. That's because I get a unique experience out of almost all of them. I can see if you have a standardized system, it's going to get old. Not that that's inherently bad either, though. This isn't one of my biggest critiques. I just pointing out something that might be a bit more dangerous about this philosophy long term than they are realizing. A number of explorations of elements and mechs expressions followed soon after. So yeah, we just have more. Yeah, here's the famous, can't really see it here, no hinge. That doesn't crop well there. I don't really want to uncrop the side here, and you can see all of what Twitter is trying to show me, because it's not great for this podcast. So yeah, that again doesn't come up the most. And I actually, in theory, I don't actually mind a more systemized type of mech. We talked about the Marvel ones earlier. Those are actually somewhat appealing to me. I don't really collect Marvel, so I haven't gotten those. But I find it a cool concept to have like a bunch of mechs you can have side by side that all go together. What really kills it for me here, though, is that this system downgrades the articulation from the Marvel system. And that just makes it less fun overall. And I have built one of these at this point. As I said, I have built the Kai Mech, which you can kind of see as the kind of an early design here. And it's not awful. Like, it doesn't disgust me like the dragons do. But it's not as fun as older mechs, I find. Like the original Titan Mech battle set, where we had Zane had his own mech here. That one didn't even have a ton of articulation either. The elbows did bend. The knees were completely locked in place. It was basically just some straight bricks for the legs. Not every set is going to be perfect. But I think the philosophy here, starting with let's do less articulation, let's simplify it more, really hurt it. And go along to the next one here. So then he talks about pitching a concept with Nick Prince Galador. And we're not going to go over the video here. It was a huge success with executives, and I do not doubt that. So he started sketching out designs for the armor shell. Again, not too much relevant for the discussion here. Personally, I'm not a huge fan of the armor shell piece. I just think it's too specialized of a piece, and it doesn't have a lot of other uses. I think you could accomplish the same thing with other bricks better. And the fact that only like one of these shells basically existed at this point probably brought it down even further. Is kind of like how Hero Factory in the beginning of CCBS, I really did not like, because they were reusing the same pieces over and over because of all the new molds. These did not have as much, as many options basically in it. But yeah, he talks about the concept here. The upgrade mechanic in these maybe looks slightly better. If you look here on the left one, that is not a mech that can be upgraded. That's a mech that is incomplete. Second one here, it's a bit better. But just second frame of it. And you have a few things to add on top of that. Yeah, I can see that. Though then those are just like weapons and flourishes and stuff, which doesn't feel like an upgrade particularly. You're never going to have the mech in between state. Not that that's my biggest issue with it all. So yeah, he didn't talk about the complaints coming in portion, so I must have remembered that from a Discord conversation, and that's hearsay at this point. Though if you're a member of TTV's Patreon, you're in that Ninjago server, you could always try to search up what he said, or go on our Discord server and hound me to try and get you some screenshots of that myself if you really want it. And I will do that. So yeah, it's basically the gist of it. Why I think this is the worst wave of Ninjago ever. It is core. There's some good elements to it, but overall, the simplified designs for trying to fill this gap and making it relatively large, comprising almost the entirety of the wave, really brings it down. Then you've got stuff that are just okay sets, like the Jay and Nia race car, or the Lloyd race car, which are not horrible sets. I feel like it's something we've seen a lot before, and it's not that exciting. But the lack of story on top of it makes it not desirable at all for a collector or fan of Ninjago. It is just a car. It's not a Ninjago car. Like, what reason is there for most Ninjago fans to get this? There's not one. And you can make the argument, well, this isn't for you, and that's a fair argument. However, is there enough of an audience for this to have justified an entire wave to this stuff? It was at a time where the gap between the summer release and the winter release, to me, feels like the longest gap. Usually, when it comes to the winter, we have like a wave or so in the spring as well, even if it's not in Ninjago, of other themes that come out. But then it's just such a long gap to me. I really am craving more Ninjago after that time between August and January. And to have been waiting so long to get this made it even more of a disappointment in my eyes. Again, this wasn't talked about in the tweet thread. I believe this was in conversations that people had with Neek, probably on that TTV server once again, that we had a few sets that were designed for older fans. The main one I have built out of this, I did end up, because I got a great deal on it, the Lloyd's Legendary Dragon. This has some stuff I like about it. It suffers again from having no story to go with it, though. And it also has various articulation issues. Those wings only go back a bit. You can hardly move them around, as opposed to that fire dragon I mentioned earlier. Yeah, it's just an okay set, and the fact it has no story connected to it brings it down to kind of a mediocre set, in my opinion. Because it doesn't really add anything into the collection in the end. Same with the Dojo Temple, which, again, I actually do own it. It's sitting by my desk here, but I've only built the fire mech out of it right now, because it is a lot of space to take up. At this point, if you've been into Ninjago since the beginning like me, space is likely an issue for you as well, what you can display, and likely you're going to use that shelf space for stuff that is in the core of Ninjago, is in... I didn't even realize, but yeah, it's actually part of the core story of Ninjago, important moments that you want to display out there. Because this is not bad. It's kind of a facade type set, which doesn't make it great still, but it's on par with something like the Battle for Ninjago City back in the day. It's certainly better than like the Monastery set from Legacy, which was like paper thing basically and had no depth to it whatsoever. It definitely has more than that. And then finally we have a set which I don't think my opinion is the majority on this one, the Ultra Combo Mech. A lot of people seem to really like this set. I did not get this. It might be something, it looks like it could be a fun building experience, so if I ever see a good sale on it, there's the possibility I pick it up. It's an interesting concept for like Ninjago Voltron, though of course this did not appear in any of the media, so I'm much less inclined to get it, as opposed to like those crystallized sets. Even with how overpriced some of them are, they're going to be what looks like a very important story moment in Ninjago, which makes them that all the more enticing to buy. This is an expensive set, though. It has no story relevance, and overall, I'm just not happy with how it came out. I think it looks weirdly gappy and unfinished in some part because of the nature of the combination. I find like that extra set of arms around the hips, those kind of jut out too much. You can see there's a very odd connection from those smaller arms to like the old Bionicle hand from like a T-Technic pin piece. I'm probably not using the right technical terms for a lot of this, but yeah, it doesn't come out to something that looks very cohesive in the end. I feel like it could have been refined to a point where it would look more cohesive, because especially those second arm piece of the big one, or how it has all those exposed holes in the driller separating for the hands. And again, the villains bring it way down as well, because they're the most boring villains Ninjago's ever had, and they have no story on top of it. So I don't like this set, especially for $90. Even though it is a good price to part ratio, but price to part isn't everything. Price to part is a factor in what makes it great. It can have a bad price to part ratio and you still feel it's worth $90 because it feels grander in itself. A part count is not always going to be what makes a set feel grand. It feels worth it. But it's also going to, this feeling of completeness, especially when you get past that $50 mark, I feel. You want a set that you get to feel full, complete, 100% just fleshed out and ironed, everything smoothed over, so it is the best experience by the time it reaches you on store shelves. I don't feel that's the case with this set. I don't think anyone's wrong for liking this. I can see if you like Voltron type stuff with the mixed colors a lot more, then you'll probably like this a lot more. I tend to like a few colors, much more cohesive color scheme, and that's why it appeals less to me. And this wouldn't be something that I would be like offended to own, like the dragons again. The dragons are some of the only ones I feel are really awful of this wave. The rest are just go down to mediocre, and this one comes down to taste for me. And that's the problem, is sets that are appealing to older fans should not just have a price barrier to them. There should be sets of every size that can appeal to everyone. But this wave really fails at that. I think it's a combination of a lot of factors. I think at the core philosophy for Ninjago Core, though, was wrong. I don't think we needed a Ninjago story or Ninjago wave that was not story focused, that dumbed it down for a certain age range, that hit all these categories that we really weren't missing previously. Maybe a lot of it was actually just because they needed a gap, because they needed more time to get crystallized as refined as it could be. That is yet to be seen completely with crystallized, as we have not had the story come out. We don't know what the scale of that will be. We know the sets are indeed incredible, though also very expensive, so you'd think for that extra price they'd get a little bit more out of it and we wouldn't have to sacrifice a previous wave. Every set should stand on its own. The price or quality of one set should never be justified by the price or quality of another. Again, Lego is a premium product. It is not something that's cheap. It is an investment, and you could get a lot more out of your money other places in many cases. I don't think that's always an issue. I don't have an issue paying for it in many cases because I feel like it's something that will last, something that retains its value, and I think up until recently, most of the time the quality was very good. We're going to talk more about the quality standards actually in an upcoming episode this Monday, so be sure to stay tuned for that, because we're going to kind of continue taking some digs at Lego here, at some of their business philosophies, which I feel are not healthy for them going forward. Penn Plays will be guest starring on that episode. He's going to provide some insight. Follow his Twitter if you haven't already, because he tweets a lot about Lego, which I appreciate. Don't always agree with everything he says, but he has very good insights on all of it. He's very knowledgeable. He comes with informed opinions. And he's not overly negative, not overly positive, which I appreciate, because I feel like a lot of people in the community fall on one side or the other. That's something I want to preface here, too. I think this is a bad wave. It doesn't hurt Ninjago overall in the long run, hopefully. But if it continues, and they can keep doing like every winter wave is like this, no story, just core sets, that's going to be awful. That's going to be so disappointing to basically go a year between good waves of Ninjago, if this is their plan going forward. Basically have the first half of the year have sets that are focused more on younger fans, on people who don't follow the story, on reused concepts, except for maybe a couple of bigger ones, which still don't have anything to do with the story, but then still cost a lot of your money to get less, because when the set is not part of the story, it is less valuable to you as a fan. This story adds inherent value to a set for a fan. And I feel like executives at LEGO do often miss the mark with that. I think this wave shows that there are some people in LEGO that don't realize how valuable the story is, or they would have said, we need to at least have something with this, at least some shorts that are completely canon that we put some effort into. Even if we are focusing so many resources on Crystallize, we can't just skip a wave, because we have people who are looking forward to each wave, to have something great continuing the story of Ninjago, continuing to build on this world, which they've been loyal to for a long time. We can't reduce that to once a year. That is not acceptable as a fan, to reduce how much content we're getting when we're sinking so much money into this line. So I don't want to get LEGO to get away with that. Again, nothing on the designers. I really, I think part of it was they were given a task, and they executed as management wanted to. And that's ultimately, at the end of the day, that's their job, is to make their managers happy. And a lot of times, they hit it in a way that makes the managers and the fans happy. Both the managers should already know what's going to make the fans happy, but they often don't. I should preface that. A lot of managers, a lot of people in business today do not understand their market. A lot of them inherited their customer base, their fans, from people before them who understood how to grow that, and they have just been riding it out at this point. I feel LEGO's kind of in that state. A lot of companies go through these waves. We see a massive turnover around the time of the LEGO movie, and they've been riding out the success on that for about a decade now. And I feel we're getting to the point where some people are going to have to realize, hey, we need to be careful, because our fans are not a given. But that's basically all I have to say on the Ninjago core line. Gonna have another more negative episode coming up this Monday, but I think very insightful. I don't like when people just always complain about stuff. I like to have a lot of fun episodes in between, like we talked about. Go back and watch the episode for us reviewing the new Crystallize sets in summer, because that is overwhelmingly positive. I think those are amazing sets. The prices have been revealed since then, and I don't think they're amazing prices, but I'm still actually really happy and excited, because they are just that good this time, and I think we should be able to expect that from everything LEGO does. As always, please support the channel by liking and subscribing, leaving a comment after this stream is over. Also, share the video to your YouTube feed. That's a new feature YouTube has installed, and it seems to be what the algorithm favors the most. Oops. Yeah, I was just checking so I can, tell you exactly how to do it. Yeah, just under the video, if you're on mobile or desktop, click on the share button. You'll see a button that says create post. Go ahead and click on that button. Just leave a comment or something with it, and go ahead and post that to your YouTube feed. This will make sure the video reaches more people. It means we can have a broader discussion, and more people can join the Discord server. We can discuss it there. People are discussing the new Optimus Prime LEGO set that's coming out in our Discord server this afternoon. And there's always good discussions like that to be had, so I recommend joining up with the link in the description below. Also, be sure to join us on Rumble. Rumble is a newer platform, which is a lot more transparent than YouTube on what you get. We actually already will make ad revenue there if we get enough views. So that's the best way to support our channel. I also upload a pre-recorded version of the podcast, as we can't live stream on Rumble just yet, but that can sometimes mean you get a bit better quality from those episodes as well. Again, be sure to join us every week at our normal time, about 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Why is the outro not playing? There we are. Yeah, join us every week, 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Mondays, for more LEGO discussion and games every week. I'm LQ. Thank you for joining me for this very different episode, and we'll see you soon.